Hey guys, I'm Raquel. Welcome to my channel Out of the Past where I talk about classic movies. And this is the new episode of the Classic Movie Roundup where I talk about 3 classic movies, the classic film book I'm currently reading, and I follow that up with a wild card segment. Now, if all of that sounds good to you, keep watching. The first movie I'm talking about today is the pre-code crime drama Blondie Johnson from 1933. I actually put up a poll on my community tab on this channel asking people to choose between 3 different Joan Blondell films. We're in the money, I've got your number, and this one, Blondie Johnson. And Blondie Johnson was the winner. So I'm going to be talking about that one today. And thank you for those who voted. And look for more polls in the future because I would love to involve you guys in choosing which films I talk about in the series. Now let's talk about Blondie Johnson. Set during the Great Depression, this movie follows the story of Blondie Johnson, played by Joan Blondell, a young woman desperate for any means of income so that she can take care of her ailing mother. When her mother passes away and she still doesn't have a job, Blondie takes matters into her own hands. She starts an extortion racket with a taxi driver named Red, played by Sterling Holloway, and together they trick men into paying for expensive cab fares, and Blondie regales them with some sob story to trick them in. One of her marks is Danny, played by Chester Morris. What Blondie doesn't know is that Danny is the leader of a crime syndicate. When he catches Blondie at her game, he sees her potential as a criminal and brings her into his gang. Blondie soon climbs the ranks, becoming Danny's right-hand woman and an integral part of the gang's many schemes. Blondie falls for Danny but doesn't believe they should mix business and pleasure and refuses to be his girl. This causes tension between the two at a pivotal time in Danny's life of crime when his rival, Max, played by Arthur Vinton, and his gang are out to bring him down. Blondie must choose between her love for Danny and her successful career as a criminal. Blondie Johnson is such a fun crime drama, pre-code film. This is a new to me favorite. I really loved it. You have the elements of like the gangster film, but also the romantic exploits and the glamour of like a woman's picture, or how they called it back in the day. This is a perfect vehicle for Joan Blondell. This is a really good starring role, but she's playing a sort of character that she plays in many of her films. She's this honest woman in a tough spot. You know, in Blondie Johnson, she's the crime boss with a heart of gold. But in other films, she does that too. She's Her characters are all self-aware. She knows that she's doing bad things, but she doesn't do it out of malice or because she's evil. She does it for survival. I mean, this is set in the Great Depression. She needs the money, and this is pretty much the only way she can do it. And Joan Blondell herself was so magnetic and charismatic on screen. It doesn't matter if she has a starring role like in this one or if she had a supporting role, she just always shines. And in this film in particular, there's a lot of quick-witted dialogue, and she is so good at delivering that. You have to watch this movie more than once because there's so many like one-liners and comebacks and snarky little comments, and a lot of the characters say these lines, but Joan Blondell's delivery is like perfection. So you have to kind of watch the movie over again, kind of like in The Women from 1939. There's lots of those like comebacks and one-liners, especially from like Rosalind Russell's character. In this film, so there's so many, especially from Joan Blondell, that you really have to watch it a second time to kind of enjoy and pick up on that, because your first viewing is going to be knowing the story and the characters, but your second one is going to have so much fun with those one-liners. And Chester Morris is second billed, and he's the leading man. And he tries to hold his own against Joan Blondell, but I'm not really sure if he succeeds in this. I mean, he does a pretty good job as like being this sophisticated gangster, and the whole love story between them is a bit believable. And you could tell like he has a soft spot for the Joan Blondell character, but Joan Blondell really steals the show here. I mean, there's a lot of supporting players that are interesting, even though Joan Blondell really dominates. Claire Dodd's character is not one of them, unfortunately. She's very underutilized, and her character is just a pawn to get in between the Joan Blondell and Chester Morris love story. She's like the third person in the triangle, and they kind of underutilize it. But I do want to point out some supporting players that I thought were really interesting. Sterling Holloway, he has a really important set of scenes in the beginning of the film, and then he reappears later in the film, and he plays this sweet, seemingly naive taxi driver who's not really naive. Joan Blondell's character tries to con him out of a free cab ride, but he's smart to her. And so you think he's going to fall for Blondie's scheme, but instead he partners with her, and they become extortionists together. And so he has some really great scenes in the beginning, especially, and it's kind of nice to see him as that character. Alan Jenkins. Now, if you know Alan Jenkins, he was a great character actor, very prolific, like so many films. If you watch those old Warner Brothers movies, chances are you're going to see Alan Jenkins somewhere. And in this film, he's at his most handsome and charming. He plays this gangster named Louis, and he has a smattering of scenes. He has one very important scene where he's like luring these other gangsters into his apartment, and his apartment's really cool. It has this trick door that is basically a fake fireplace that he pulls and turns, and it opens up into a bar, like a hidden bar. And this is the era of Prohibition, so they had to hide the booze. And so it kind of turns into this really fancy bar, but there's this little sliding door that perfectly fits a machine gun. And that becomes an important scene in that. And Alan Jenkins in this is just so hip and cool and so believable as a gangster. And I just really thought that was a great role for him. And he has that really one great scene. So it was really fun to see him in that. And overall, just the little elements, like if you like the 1930s aesthetic, then look for the apartments in this movie, in addition to the one Alan Jenkins has. Joan Blondell's character, she goes from like rags to riches essentially, and she's undergone this transformation we don't really see. We just kind of see her living in the back room of a pharmacy, and then living in this like really just glamorous Art Deco apartment with a rooftop balcony overlooking New York City. It's like stunning. So if you watch the Art Deco apartment scenes, look for things like there's the headboard on the bed, the dressers, the sofa, even the lampshades, and even like small details like the doorbell plate or even the door itself. And outside the apartment, even the elevator doors, like all those like really cool, like symmetrical, just Art Deco designs that I just love. I'm not really good at explaining them. I just love to look at them, and everything's just so fancy. So it's one of those things where you just watch to kind of soak up the aesthetics of that era. And another film I'm thinking about is a Female, which also has like amazing Art Deco set decorations. So it's just kind of a fun element. So back to the supporting players, I do want to point out one in particular who is the Japanese actress Toshia Mori. She plays the character Lulu, and she's a member of Chester Morris's crime syndicate. And she's also the girlfriend of one of the other gangsters, played by Earl Fox, and his character's named Scannell, I think it is. And I love her character because it's a small role. She has like a few scenes, and she doesn't have like a ton of dialogue, but she's an integral part of the gang. Like they all carry out these elaborate schemes, and they all kind of are actors in these schemes in order to see them out. And she's one of those important characters. I think it's also interesting because she is Japanese American. that she has this romantic relationship with a white man in the story. And that's something kind of unheard of in the era, but this is also a pre-code movie, so they were, fitting in things that might not have been mainstream. You got to remember this is also the time of anti-miscegenation laws, and there was a prevailing prejudice against mixed race relationships. So to show this on screen in this movie is pretty interesting for the time. Now, I did some research on Tashia Murray. She was born in Japan and she moved to the U.S. I think when she was 10 years old. And she started off as a film actress in the silent film era and then transitioned to sound. And she worked all the way up until like the mid 1930s. It looks like she retired from acting when she got married to actor Alan Jung. Um, and she had a bunch of like small uncredited roles before Blondie Johnson. And then it was around this time, 1932, 1933, where she was getting some more interesting roles with on-screen credits. And the reason for this is that she was actually named the Wampas Baby Star of 1932. I believe there were 15 of them chosen that year. And Wampas stood for Western Association of Motion Picture Advertisers. And each year they picked new actresses in Hollywood that they thought had potential to be movie stars. And they named them the baby stars because they were brand new. They were very young. I believe Tashia Murray was I think 19 years old when she was chosen. She was very, very young, and she was probably 20 years old when she made Blondie Johnson. And the Wampas Baby Stars, Wampas did all of this promotion around being named a baby star. It was a big deal, and the program ran from like the early 1920s to 1935. So Tashia Murray was at the kind of the very end because she was chosen in 1932, and I believe she's the only non-white actress to be chosen as one of the baby stars. So that's really interesting, and because this was such a publicity push, and because it was so good for young actresses getting their start, I believe that that's really what led to Tashia Murray getting more credited on-screen roles with a little more substantial scenes. And I love Tashia Murray in Blondie Johnson. She's dressed to the nines in these like glamorous outfits by Ori Kelly, and she wears them so well. She's just like absolutely stunning. And she's got a few scenes where she showcases like her smoldering stare, and she has like this like really biting dialogue. And I wish she could have, starred in some films of her own because I feel like she had potential, and you can really see that in Blondie Johnson. And she could have held her own, I think, because she had really that screen presence. Okay, some fun facts about Blondie Johnson. This was directed by Ray Enright, and this was the first of 8 movies that he directed that featured Joan Blondell. In the other 2 movies that were on my poll, Were in the Money and I've Got Your Number are 2 of those 8 films. And another film of note too is Dames, one of the Busby Berkeley musicals. This movie was produced by First National Pictures, which at the time was part of Warner Brothers. So Warner Brothers bought the majority stake of First National Pictures back in 1929 from Fox. So they were the owners of that. And First National Pictures was making A and B movies at the same time as like the main studio Warner Brothers, but they were making different types of pictures. Like Warner Brothers was making more like prestige pictures, and First National was making like the crime dramas, the comedies, some of the dramas that didn't necessarily fit for like the Warner Brothers studio. So Joan Blondell was a Warner Brothers contract star since 1930, but this is actually her first like real leading role where she pretty much dominates the film. She's in pretty much every single scene in the movie. And Blondie Johnson was written by Earl Baldwin, and it was written specifically with Joan Blondell in mind. Um, and this was considered at the time to be like a female focused equivalent to Little Caesar with Edward G. Robinson. In fact, Joan Blondell herself called her character a feminine Little Caesar. So I think that's interesting. They took the gangster film trope and they kind of merged it with a woman's picture, which would have appealed to definitely a woman's audience, although of course women actually went to gangster films too. So if, as a side note, if you're interested in learning more about the history of gangster movies, which is really, really interesting, I highly recommend you check out Film 101, which is a YouTube series that Turner Classic Movies does on their channel. And they have an episode that was, I believe, back in April called Gangster Movies and the Legacy of Warner Brothers. And I'll leave a link down below so you'll watch it. It's really interesting. And it was researched and co-written by yours truly. And I had so much fun working on that. So it would be amazing if you went to watch it and let me know what you think. So Blondie Johnson, if you're interested in watching it, it's available on DVD from the Warner Archive Collection. And you can also rent that on VOD on Amazon and on other platforms. It's also shown on Turner Classic Movies, which is how I watched it. Next movie I'm talking about is this one right here, Beverly of Graustark from 1926, and this is on Blu-ray from Undercrank Productions. Someone had commented on the channel that they wanted me to talk a bit about all the Marion Davies releases that have been coming out. So I had this one in my to-be-watched stack, so I figured I'd talk about it here. And here is the Blu-ray if you want to see it. Now let's get into Beverly of Graustark. Marion Davies stars as Beverly Calhoun. She's the cousin of Oscar, played by Creighton Hale, who is about to be crowned as the prince of the fictional kingdom of Graustark. Beverly and Oscar were raised almost like siblings and have a very close bond. When Oscar is severely injured in a skiing accident, General Marlanax, played by Roy Darcy, convinces Beverly to pretend that she is Oscar and travel to Graustark to fulfill Oscar's royal duties while he recovers. Because she knows Oscar so well, and because he hasn't been seen by the public since he was an infant, the general believes that Beverly can pull this off. Beverly dresses as a man and pretends to be Oscar, and she soon comes to realize that Oscar has many enemies who don't want to see him live long enough for his coronation. On the way to Graustark, Beverly meets Danton, played by Antonio Moreno. He's this handsome goat farmer who saves Beverly from a mountainside ambush. Danton becomes Beverly's bodyguard, and Beverly begins to have feelings for him, which complicates things because Danton believes she is Prince Oscar. Okay, my thoughts on this film. I tend to gravitate towards stories like this, ones where gender, like the story plays with gender or characters swap genders, because I think it's a fascinating exploration of how gender roles work in society. And even though the conceit of the film isn't like terribly plausible, and despite like multiple efforts in the story to really convince the audience that the protagonist can get away with this, I do think that Marion Davies herself does a really beautiful job at playing those dual roles of playing Beverly and then Beverly as Oscar. She's very convincing as a woman dressed as a man, and she looks quite handsome as a young man in uniform. I love those sequences, and I love how they dressed her up. I think she looks amazing. So Marion Davies was in another movie called Little Old New York from 1923, which also is available from Undercrank Productions if you're interested. So in that one, she plays a young woman who dresses like her brother to claim an inheritance, and she's traveling from like Ireland to New York in order to claim the inheritance. And the conceit is somewhat similar, like they don't know what the brother looks like, but the brother can't actually make the trip, and this is the only way they can get the money. She's absolutely delightful in that movie. I really do enjoy that one, and I think Little Old New York and Beverly of Graustark would make like a nice little double bill. And you could also even pair that with Sylvia Scarlett from 1935. That one stars Katharine Hepburn, and she plays this woman who dresses as a man to protect her father, who's then they're kind of on the run from the law. Um, and it kind of like how the Marion Davies and Tony Moreno dynamic love story where like it's in the scenes it's two men but it's really a woman and a man. You get the same kind of storyline when Katharine Hepburn's character falls for Cary Grant and they can't quite finalize the romance while she's appearing as a man. That's sort of the whole conceit of the story. So those stories are quite similar. Um, and just going back to Antonio Moreno, he was quite dashing in Beverly of Graustark. He was one of those like early Latin lovers of cinema, and he had this really dynamic like screen presence, and I really like him in this film as like the handsome goat farmer turned royal bodyguard, and the chemistry between him and Marion Davies is quite interesting. I really liked it. So now on to interesting facts. The movie was based on the novel Beverly of Graustark, written and published in 1904 by George Barr McCutcheon. And Graustark is kind of hard to say. I've been having a hard time trying to pronounce it. So he wrote a series of books about Graustark, which is like this fictional Eastern European kingdom. I've also read it that it's possibly a Balkan fictional kingdom. So this book in particular, Beverly of Graustark, was adapted previously in 1914 in a film starring Linda Arvidsson, who at one point was married to D.W. Griffith. I thought that was interesting. The 1926 version with Marion Davies was made by MGM, and Marion Davies was a contract star there. The film was shot in Culver City at the studio, but then also shot in the Sierra Nevada mountains. There's some like outdoor scenes, especially when they're traveling. They're trying to bring like Prince Oscar to the royal palace. There's also this elaborate castle that was made specifically for this movie on the studio lot, which I think is really interesting. So the production quality is on the higher level because you have like a major Hollywood studio and you have a major Hollywood star with Marion Davies, and you have all this effort put into the visuals, which I think is really interesting. Marion Davies herself, I read, caught the flu during filming, and they had to halt the production for 10 days. But otherwise, it was kind of like, you know, everything moving forward. One thing that's really interesting is the final sequences are shot in 2-strip Technicolor. And in the Blu-ray, you see it, and it looks amazing. And in many cases, these like 2-strip color final sequences were often like the ones that were attached to otherwise like black and white films. Like this one, Beverly of Graustark, is fully black and white with a little bit of blue tinting, and then you have the 2-strip Technicolor final sequence tacked at the end. Now, a lot of these 2-strip Technicolor sequences sometimes were like separated from the original movie and lost forever. One that comes to mind is Good News of 1930. That one is the adaptation of the Broadway play musical. That was made again in 1947 with June Allison and Peter Lawford. But the original adaptation in 1930 was a black and white movie with a big 2-strip Technicolor finale. That is missing. That is gone. And that's why you don't see the movie released, because it doesn't exist in its final form. Even though I have like a bootleg copy of just what exists, and it's a great musical. I really love it. So much fun, so indicative of the era, but we're missing that part. So it is really quite special that Beverly of Graustark has its Technicolor ending and that we can watch it. So Beverly of Graustark is available on Blu-ray from Undercrank Productions. This was digitally restored from a 4K scan of the 35mm nitrate print held by the Library of Congress, and includes an original music score by silent film accompanist Ben Modell. and the packaging is really great. It doesn't really have any extras, but the quality is absolutely amazing, so I highly encourage you to check this one out. And I want to thank Undercrank Productions for sending me this for review. Okay, now that we're past Thanksgiving, let's talk about some Christmas movies. And the third movie I'm talking about today is The Cheaters from 1945. Set in New York City during the Christmas season, The Cheaters follows the story of Mr. Pigeon, played by Eugene Pallett, a businessman on the verge of bankruptcy. He and his family are accustomed to a life of luxury. His family includes his shopaholic wife, Clara, played by Billy Burke, and his children, played by Ann Gillis, Ruth Terry, and David Holt. Mr. Pigeon learns that his rich uncle is on his deathbed, and he's counting on the uncle's $5 million inheritance to solve all of his financial problems. In the meantime, his family has taken in a charity case. It's a starving artist, Mr. M, played by Joseph Schildkraut. He's an actor out of work due to an injury. Or so that's what he says. When the rich uncle eventually dies, he leaves the inheritance not to Mr. Pigeon, but to another starving artist, out of work and very broke actress Florrie, played by Ona Munson. The family has 1 week to figure out how to keep the inheritance from Florrie so they can keep it for themselves. But as the Christmas spirit starts to take hold, it has an effect on them and they start to change their minds. There's quite a lot going on in this movie and it feels a bit convoluted, but it is saved by this like eccentric bunch of characters who are all kind of charming in their own way. They kind of keep you engaged even if you're not quite sure what's happening plot-wise because everyone's trying to scheme each other. I'm glad I watched it. I'm not sure I really cared for this viewing. I didn't get those like cozy vibe, warm feelings that I usually get from Christmas movies in which these characters kind of learn a lesson and come to do good when they intentionally set out to do bad. I just kind of didn't get that. But I feel like this one will improve on multiple viewings because you kind of have to get through the slog of all of the plot points and this weird like who's scheming who sort of platform in order to really enjoy the characters and the story. Now, there is a lot of Christmas elements in this movie that anyone who loves a good Christmas movie will enjoy. The story takes place in the 6 days before Christmas, and you have scenes where they're decorating a Christmas tree, people are Christmas shopping, there are presents, and they're doing charitable works for the holiday season. The Charles Dickens story, A Christmas Carol, becomes an important plot point as the Schildkraut character, Mr. M, kind of recounts that story to them, to the family. And there's also a scene when the St. Luke's Episcopal Church choristers, which was a group of young boys who sang music in numerous movies throughout the 1930s and 1940s. They sing Silent Night and The First Noel in a later scene, which is really quite nice. This movie did remind me of My Man Godfrey from 1936, where you have like a forgotten man who's taken in by this rich family. And Eugene Pallett happens to be in that movie too. That one almost gives me more Christmas vibes than this movie. I would recommend watching that one too if you haven't already. This could be a nice double bill if you wanted to pair the two because they have that connection with that particular plot conceit and then Eugene Pallett as a character. So some interesting facts about the movie. This was directed by Joseph Kane for Republic Studios, and Republic Pictures was this amalgamation of struggling studios and production companies that all kind of merged together and became this one larger studio. And this particular story was an original story written by a married couple, Francis Hyland and Albert Ray. And I got some conflicting stories about this, about how Republic Studios came to have the project. I did read that Paramount originally bought it with Carol Lombard and Lionel Barrymore in mind, but they both died before that could be produced. So Paramount supposedly sold the story rights to Republic Studios. And Republic Studios bought the film rights for Binnie Barnes, but then like she was not in this movie. So I'm not really sure how that came to play, but I thought that was interesting that it could have been meant for Carole Lombard and Lionel Barrymore. It would have been a totally different movie. So Joseph Schildkraut, who was an Austrian actor, he stars in the film as the starving artist, the actor. Um, he This is a very difficult time in his career because he had a very he made a really bad decision in his career and signed with Republic Studios. It was financially motivated, and he also wanted to have some starring roles, and they had promised him some starring roles. But what it ended up getting was some more supporting parts, even though I believe he might be top billed in this movie. It still does feel like a supporting role in it. So he counts that as the one of the major mistakes of his life, which is kind of sad. Um, Another sad story too is Ona Munson, who's best known for playing Belle Watling in Gone with the Wind. This came at the very end of her career. She only made like a couple more films after The Cheaters, and she appeared in a few television series, like single episodes, before she passed away. At a young age, she'd been struggling with health, unfortunately. So it's kind of sad that this is kind of at the end of her career. We do have Billy Burke, who also recognizable from a big 1939 movie, not Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz. She plays Glinda the Good Witch. And Billy Burke is in her element, playing kind of like the ditzy but lovable wife. So I really love to see her in this. And anybody who is a classic movie fan loves Eugene Pallett because he played these lovable, cantankerous characters. He's always a delight to see. This also comes at a very difficult point in his life at the end of his career. So the previous year, he was in a film called In the Meantime, Darling from 1944. And that was a Fox movie directed by Otto Preminger. And some stuff went down. I found this from Otto Preminger biographer Chris Fujiwara. His book, I have his book. And he said that there was a clash between Eugene Pallett and Otto Preminger. Supposedly, Eugene Pallett said some like pro-Hitler stuff. He said something racist towards black actor Clarence Muse, who was one of the actors in the film. And Preminger took his complaints to Daryl F. Zanuck, who was running Fox at the time, and Zanuck fired Eugene Pallett. So when Eugene Pallett made The Cheaters, he was a freelancer. And he didn't make many more films after this. His last film was Suspense in 1946. And then Eugene Pallett like had some health problems. He was also really paranoid about the Cold War, and I believe he built like either a bomb-proof or a gun-proof house in Oregon. And he said that it was his throat problems that caused him to stop acting, but it could have been a combination of both his like declining health, but also the fact that he was fired from Fox for bad behavior. So on a happier note, let's talk about the release of the movie The Cheaters. So it was released in July of 1945, which it's a Christmas movie. It's a very, very Christmas heavy movie. So to be released in July is interesting. It wasn't completely out of the ordinary. Christmas in Connecticut also was released in July of 1945, and that is full on Christmas. Christmas is in the title too, which is interesting because The Cheaters has no reference to Christmas in the title. And when it was re-released in 1949, it was retitled The Castaway, and then no Christmas, nothing that evokes like Christmas at all in the title. So I saw the title, The Cheaters, and I thought, oh, film noir, crime drama, not, a familial Christmas movie. In another film that came out had holiday vibes that came out in July was Bachelor Mother from 1939, which takes place over Christmas and New Year's and definitely has that kind of Christmas holiday vibe, and that was also released in the middle of summer, which is interesting. So the Cheaters, along with a bunch of other Republic Studio pictures, were sold to television. So this became a regular Christmas movie shown every year in the 1950s, especially. So it was like a well-known Christmas movie for a while, but then it kind of fell off, and now it's pretty obscure. I hadn't even heard of it until recently. And if you want to watch it, The Cheaters is available to watch on YouTube. I'll leave a link down below of how I watched it. It's not really available anywhere else. There is a gray market DVD that you can get, but otherwise, you gotta watch it on YouTube. So I found out about The Cheaters from this book right here, Christmas in the Movies, 35 Classics to Celebrate the Season by Jeremy Arnold. This is the revised and expanded edition from TCM and Running Press. You see here, you have this beautiful cover with the main cast of White Christmas. You got Danny Kaye, Vera Ellen, Rosemary Clooney, and Bing Crosby. And this is an expanded edition from the 2018 version, which also you see White Christmas on there, but you have more of a close-up of the stars. And you see the difference here. This one had 30 movies, and this one has 35. This is obviously a smaller edition. And this one, the newer one, has 70 pages of additional content. So it is a more substantial book, basically more Christmas for your buck. And what I like about this book and the previous one too is that with this one you get 35 Christmas movies. And you can't watch 35 Christmas movies in a day, but you can read about 35 Christmas movies in a day with this book. So it's a really great way to kind of extend the experience of the Christmas movie. And if it's something that really interests you, this is definitely a must-have because it kind of just encapsulates all of it. And they're mostly classic movies, I would say like 60s and earlier. However, there are some newer movies too. So it includes like Die Hard and Elf and all of those. So if you really love the classic Christmas movies, you get Christmas in Connecticut, It's a Wonderful Life, Miracle on 34th Street, White Christmas, like that's on the cover, Holiday Inn. I really liked reading about Remember the Night and Beyond Tomorrow, one of my personal favorites, Holiday Affair, and even the movie Elf, which I learned so much about, stuff that I didn't realize had gone into making the film. And then throughout the book are some thematic essays, which are really interesting. There's one on the Christmas movies of 1947. My personal favorite was Christmas and Film Noir, which I thought was interesting. Disney Christmas cartoons, essays on different adaptations of Little Women, A Christmas Carol, Three Godfathers. And I just wanted to spotlight that Christmas and Film Noir essay. It's the best one in the book. I think it's just so interesting. And I like how the author explores how film noir is about bringing characters down and how Christmas movies are about lifting characters up, and how those are like conflicting notions and storytelling styles. And he explains how certain film noirs use the Christmas element in it and how it works and how it doesn't work. It was just very, very interesting. So this book is just it's really fun for the holidays. I feel like this is a really good gift book for anyone who's just really intensely into Christmas movies. If you're not a Christmas movie person, I would not go for this, because this is full on embraces the holiday and the movies and the storytelling styles. And it's just like really beautiful, a beautiful book to have. And I love that it has some lesser known movies, and then it also has the classics too, like It's a Wonderful Life. So, and I want to thank TCM and Running Press for sending me this for review. Okay, now for the wildcard segment. Let's talk about the upcoming TCM and Julien's auction. So they've been teaming up together for this Hollywood Legends series, and every few months they host this in-person and online auction of all this movie memorabilia. Now, starting in December 14th and 15th, they're holding the next one, which is Robots, Wizards, Heroes, and Aliens. And a lot of the memorabilia here is actually more contemporary movies like Aliens, Star Wars, the Harry Potter series, the Rocky movies. But I wanted to spotlight some of the memorabilia that would be of interest to old Hollywood fans. The first one is lot number 32. Cinematographer W. Howard Green, they misspelled Green, it should be Greene, his honorary Academy Award for his color cinematography in Phantom of the Opera from 1943. Now this, just to point out, this is an honorary Oscar, not a competitive one, because I think there are different rules about what Oscars can be sold. So this one is estimated to go between $80,000 and $100,000. Next up is lot number 69, which is one of Kirk Douglas's costumes from the film 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea from 1954. This costume comes with a DVD of the movie, and it's estimated to go between $30,000 and $40,000. Next up is lot number 227, an original Italian theater advertisement for Fritz Lang's science fiction classic Metropolis from 1927. This seemed really exciting to see on the list. This is probably the oldest item on the lot. This is estimated to go between $1,000 and $2,000. Lot number 229, 35mm theatrical release trailer for Forbidden Planet from 1956. And if you're on a budget, this might be a good one to grab because the estimate is between $200 and $300. Another one that's probably more budget friendly is lot number 386, Vincent Price's original self-portrait caricature drawing with signature. And this one is also estimated at $200 and $300, but it already has some bids against it, so it might go for much higher. Now, what do you think about these lots? Would you ever bid on one of these auctions? I really love watching these TCM and Julien's auctions live. I'll leave a link down below. What you can do is, even if you're not interested in bidding, you can watch it, and there's live coverage of the auctioneer collecting the bids and announcing the final sale. And those are really, really fun to watch. Well, that's it for this week's episode. Make sure you like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. What Christmas movie are you watching these days? And if you don't like Christmas movies, what other type of classic movies are you watching? Leave me a comment below, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!